It's one of the longest months that you can ever talk about, the month of January. I woke up this morning, we're still in January, but good evening to you. Welcome to Business Focus here on TV3. My name is Alfred Okansi, the 22nd of January 2018. And tonight, the governor of the Bank of Ghana has announced the maintenance of the monetary policy rate at 20%. We'll get into details of that as to what exactly went to the decision to maintain the policy rate at 20%. Also, with Bitcoins, it's not a new conversation we're having on this platform, but the Bank of Ghana has issued a stern warning, and as a matter of fact, a statement to that effect that it is illegal for now to engage or trade in Bitcoin. So find out exactly why that statement and what the Bank of Ghana is doing about this growing situation globally, of which Ghana is not left out of it. We'll get into the details of that as well. And also, the governor spoke about the changes of the various governors and the deputies at the Bank of Ghana, which some people have raised question that it could bother on the independence and also the effectiveness of the central bank. We'll talk about it tonight here on Business Focus here on TV3. Let's find out the summaries of the stories throughout the week. It's one of the longest months that you can ever talk about, the month of January. I woke up this morning, we're still in January, but good evening to you. Welcome to Business Focus here on TV3. My name is Alfred Okansi, the 22nd of January 2018. And tonight, the governor of the Bank of Ghana has announced the maintenance of the monetary policy rate at 20%. We'll get into details of that as to what exactly went to the decision to maintain the policy rate at 20%. Also, with Bitcoins, it's not a new conversation we're having on this platform, but the Bank of Ghana has issued a stern warning, and as a matter of fact, a statement to that effect that it is illegal for now to engage or trade in Bitcoin. So find out exactly why that statement and what the Bank of Ghana is doing about this growing situation globally, of which Ghana is not left out of it. We'll get into the details of that as well. And also, the governor spoke about the changes of the various governors and the deputies at the Bank of Ghana, which some people have raised question that it could bother on the independence and also the effectiveness of the central bank. We'll talk about it tonight here on Business Focus here on TV3. Let's find out the summaries of the stories throughout the week. Welcome back from the summaries of the business stories that made headlines throughout the week. There's a lot more business stories on 3news.com. We want to maintain at 20%. It's the rate that influences the central bank's rate of lending to commercial banks. Just basically, that's what it means. But let me start off with you, Mr. J. Going into there were some analysts who said it could be increased because of the fears of inflation going up. The decision to maintain it, first of all, your view about it and how this is going to influence the possible upward adjustment inflation rate in the coming months.
I think they keeping it at 20% was more in line with what the majority expected. I think a few people had mentioned that, but I think most everybody else was expecting that it would be kept at 20%, largely because the risks were fairly balanced between inflation and growth. Now, in the previous meeting, a cut had been expected, but had not materialized, largely because inflation had picked up in the month of September ahead of the November meeting. We've seen the same thing happen in December ahead of this meeting. However, on the other hand, growth has also picked up significantly. I think if you read the Bank of Ghana's press release, you realize the sense of relief that whoever drafted the document had, that non-oil GDP growth was actually on a rebound. So it looks like everything was fairly balanced. Growth was picking up significantly, and inflation, even though had gone a little off the mark, was clearly still within expectations because the dollar has still remained stable against the cedi, or the cedi has maintained the stability against the dollar. I mean, whichever way you want to look at it. And so going forward, it was largely expected that they were going to keep the policy at 20% because of the balance of risk between growth and inflation.
I see. Now, Mr. Jackson, going into, did you also expect that it was going to be increased, at least from the fundamentals that we saw?
I actually expected such. I thought that on the balance, an increase was more likely than even to keep it
at the same
rate. Simply because when you look at some of the pressures we are facing, for example, he talks about the underlying factors improving. I'm not sure really outside the headline rates, inflation, the exchange rate, there's still fundamental problems we have. One is single spine and the amount of money that is spent on single spine. And when you add that to the fact that this month,
that's the public wage bill.
The public wage bill. And the fact that this month there's actually there was an increment promised.
Sure.
And I think it's been delivered. So the wage bill has gone up again. Now, when you add that to the fact that inflation started picking up, etc., I actually thought that I felt that to be cautious, the rate might actually go up. But remember also that this has to be balanced against their long-term goal of bringing the rate down.
Absolutely.
So on one hand, the wage bill has gone up by some estimate as much as 15%. This
month. I mean, beginning this fiscal year.
Beginning this fiscal year, but as much as 15%. And when you add that to the fact that our still have pressures on that fiscal deficit, and the banking system has had a bit of relief from the ESLA bond.
Right.
So I would have put up that rate just to be cautious and make sure that some of the gains that have been made are not lost.
I see. Now, I'm looking at this, and this is a very interesting point that you're drawing, especially when you talk about the overall objective of bringing it down. I mean, from January to December 2017, you look at the analysis where about 550 basis points in terms of the policy reduction from that particular fiscal year period of analysis. Now, they have that objective of still reducing it. How do you balance that, Ben, with the fundamentals of the economy not favoring a decision to reduce or even maintain from what Mr. Jackson has put out there?
I think it is not out of place. You see, the 20% we have, right? And you did mention that it has declined by 550 basis points over the course of 2017.
Sure.
But the honest truth is also that 20% is still rather high as a monetary policy rate. You can compare it to other, even African countries or any other developing economies that have had inflationary issues or even problems with their currencies. And realize that we might not be the highest now, but we are still rather high. Now, the issue is that one of the main points, at least when Dr. Wampa was governor, one of the main reasons why the monetary policy rate was kept at such a high level was to support the currency. I mean, everybody knew it was supposed to drive inflation down, but the transmission mechanism was supposed to go through checking inflation, checking exchange rate depreciation, and then keeping non-food inflation and imported inflation in check. Now, the issue is that over the last 2 years, in 2016 and 2017, we have seen very minimal depreciation against the dollar, even though we haven't performed very well against the pound and the euro. The advantage for us is that a lot of our imports actually are in dollars.
Absolutely.
Which supports the decline in inflation that we've seen over the course of 2017. So the issue here is that, yes, there was a slight increase in inflation in December. I think there was another one in September as well, and even earlier on, also in July or in August. But the trend is still down, is still downward. And 20%, like I said, is still high enough to be able to allow the Bank of Ghana to meet its monetary policy goals.
But really, could we have seen any reduction? I mean, considering the fundamentals of the economy and what we're experiencing.
I think that would be in line with what Mr. Jackson is saying now, that it would be better for them to act cautiously now. It would make sense to somebody. But the truth is also that there are other risks, especially in view of the fact that interest rates in the US are expected to rise in 2018, which means that the stability in the city we enjoyed in 2016 and 2017 might not be the same going forward. You want to take action, or you want to do something that will not put you on the back foot. So let's adopt a wait-and-see attitude, and let's hold on for now. And that's where the cautious approach comes in this particular situation.
Because you're looking at, Mr. Jackson, having a government objective of inflation target horizon being maintained and the medium-term inflation of 8 plus or minus 2 being achieved this year. At least that's the objective that they have. So you see that target in mind influencing whatever decision that is taken about the policy rate. And how risky will this be, for the lack of a better expression, if we have to go this way?
Now, bear in mind that the complex factors that influence the decision is not only on inflation. There's also, part of it is an expectation of government borrowing.
True.
Now, this year, the feeling we get, when you look at what is happening, that there's going to be a level of increased borrowing again. The last year has been fairly consistent in keeping borrowing low, or when they had to borrow, bringing funds in from outside rather than pulling in domestic funds. But I think that one of the reasons why they kept it the same, or some of us even felt that it could go up, was that we expect that the government would borrow a bit more this year. Because you can't, the challenge you have is that there are serious pressures.
What influences that expectation of government borrowing more this year? I mean, I just want to understand that.
Well, very simply, our revenues are not going anywhere. It's as simple. It's look at it this way. Your income is fixed, right? You've just added 15% to your wage bill, or thereabouts, and you've done a little bit about your interest payment, but they're still very high. Where are you going to go? You have to borrow. You have to borrow to stay alive. There's no. Listen, let's be clear. There are horrendous pressures on the managers of this economy. Horrendous pressures, and let nobody belittle the pressure they are under, right? Because fundamentally, people, there's no money. Some of the things you see happening, random effects, random incidents, are simply because there's so much pressure on raising funds that you will find DVLA tries to raise funds through some
other means.
They get into trouble. Then you find another agency trying to raise funds. They get into trouble. And it should tell you that fundamentally there's very little money available. And all the MDAs who can raise internally generated funds are being put under pressure to raise. Look at the incident with GBC. They seem isolated, but when you join the dots, you see a very definite effort to tell everybody there's no money. Go and try and raise money on your own. That sent GBC into this whole TV license spiral. That sent DVLA into its whole
We've seen budget cuts in,
and it's
to a lot
on
of
and
these,
on and on. Look at the sports ministry, what they're talking.
Absolutely.
So you see, it takes there's very little money. There's going to be increased borrowing because some of the things, and remember that the little funds that we are getting in have to go to support things like free SHS. The bill looms large, and is going to be doubled. Because this year, you're going to have to pay for those who came into first year last year, and then there are going to be new entrants. And now people are even more excited about free SHS.
Absolutely. Now, Ms. Amwa, are these predictions of Mr. Jackson really in line with your reading of the situation going into this year? There's going to be a lot more borrowing on the part of government because revenue sources internally cannot support the level of expenditure expected this year.
Okay, so let me take you back to this very simple trick in economics. You know how we calculate a debt to GDP ratio? It's total debt divided by GDP. Now, if I can borrow more, but I can grow GDP at a faster pace, I can keep my GDP or debt to GDP ratio constant over time. Now, GDP growth rates are expected to be significantly higher. In fact, you have heard the EIU and other people say that the government's own GDP growth expectations are actually lower than what will actually occur. Okay. Which means that they have more room to borrow if they want to. The issue Mr. Jackson brings in is valid because we have always underperformed our own revenue targets that we set for ourselves, 2017 included. The problem is if that's
But the GRA says 2017 was a much more improved situation.
Yes, but they still underperformed.
Yes,
every single time. And you have to realize that they even underperformed the July target that they had reviewed downwards. So that is bad in
the
itself.
first quarter and the second
Again,
quarter.
they have set up a lot of policies that they say are going to drive revenue growth or that are going to help them block all the loopholes.
Yes.
But we haven't seen a lot of them being implemented. And they keep telling us, oh, they'll be implemented in April, in July. These things should have been done probably last year so that over the course of 2018, we can see its effect over the course of the year. Unfortunately, they haven't been in place. So the issue still stands that it's possible we are going to underperform our revenue targets again. And that is where the risk of higher borrowing comes in. Because the moment they underperform and they are under pressure to do all the things that they promised and that they have already started, then that's where the risk of borrowing comes in. And they'll have more room to do it if GDP growth actually grows very fast. Because then they can still borrow a lot and still claim that the debt to GDP ratio is still within the limits.
See, you know, already, because today we're told that the inflation for December is 11.8 and as against the 11.7 in November, so 0.1% increase. So I'm looking at the medium-term inflation of 8 plus or minus 2. Is it something that will be achieved?
Oh, it's very achievable. You see, it's another statistical fluke. We measure inflation as a year-on-year measure. Basis. It's a year-on-year thing. Okay, so every year between December and January, there's a little shift. We call that base shifting. It's a statistical anomaly that you don't even need to understand. But the point is that they are just numbers and figures, and they have a reason for thinking that it's going to fall within 6 to 10%. That's actually what the 8 plus or minus 2% means. It's actually very, very possible. And by December 2018, personally, I feel that we are going to get there. You see, but that's not all that the economy has as a problem. We have other issues that have to be dealt with, and not least is the debt problem that they need to resolve.
That needs to be resolved. I need to really move on to another rather interesting comment by the governor early today, indicating that the central bank said it has taken notice of recent developments in the use, holding and trading of virtual or digital currencies such as Bitcoin, and wishes to notify the general public that these activities in digital currency are currently not licensed under the Payment System Act 2003. So the total value of Bitcoin now stands in excess of $300 billion. But what is Bitcoin and how does it work? My colleague Ebenezer Kumboateng has just some fundamental or basic information about Bitcoin you should get to know. Take a listen to it. All right, so the Bank of Ghana, essentially, the statement that they've released, let me just read the essentials and then we can move on to this. So the Bank of Ghana is currently investing a lot of resources to further enhance the payment and settlement system, including digital forms of money, and also to introduce cybersecurity guidelines to safeguard electronic and online financial transactions. A revised Payment System Act, referred to as Payment Systems and Services Bill, will be considered by Parliament within the next couple of months. This revision should bring the electronic payment space up to date to international standards and aligned with the evolving electronic payments landscape. So essentially what they are saying is that because we do not have the systems in place to check this, anybody doing it, I mean, they know it's happening, but it is legal. Mr. Jackson.
I wanted to say, hold.
Why?
The governor chose his words very carefully. He didn't say it was illegal. He never said it was illegal. What he said, really, if I were to distill it, is two things. If you do any Bitcoin stuff, it is not under my control, because the act by which I follow, it doesn't govern your control. Listen, there are people who tell you they're trading gold in this country.
True.
Are they governed by the central bank? No. But are they effectively taking deposits? Yes.
They are.
So let's be clear. Two, he says very clearly, well, I don't know about Bitcoin. I don't have the capacity. I don't understand. Let's no. He says there's an expectation that it will transform, but I don't know. So I'm not studying. In fact, let's be clear. What he talks about in terms of the new act going to Parliament has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It has to do with mobile money, web-enabled payments like Visa, etc.
A lot more of these electronic payment systems,
which are very established. So let's be clear. He says, I don't know. There's hope that it will change the landscape, but I don't know. I don't have the capacity.
Is that a conservative position to take, or really because there is no system to check it, I would rather want to say I have no idea of it? And when we do know it's happening, it's already ongoing. No, I mean, why? You see
the thing that he's a central banker. You see, he's a central banker, and that is what you've seen with almost all the other central bankers around the world. You see, the problem is that people are finding it difficult to separate Bitcoin from the underlying technology. Now, the underlying technology, blockchain, is very useful actually, and not just for payment systems, but for a host of things. Rwanda is using the blockchain technology to develop its land registry system.
Good.
Because it can't be changed. And, you know, we have all these issues in Africa about how people sell the same piece of land to 5 or 6 different people. So it's very useful in other applications. Payment currency, payment systems being one of those. You see, the problem with Bitcoin is that it has gotten to the point where it has ceased being a payment system and has become more of a speculative asset. So the best the central banker can do for you is to tell you that, okay, fine, if you want to invest in it, to go ahead. But this doesn't really fall under our normal jurisdiction of payment systems.
So if anything, it cannot protect you.
And you know the issue in Ghana where whenever something goes bad, everybody starts attacking the Bank of Ghana. So this just they coming out to say, okay, fine, you can go ahead and do it. Which is why I agree with Mr. Jackson. He did not say it was illegal.
No,
he was just sounding an alarm that
if the central government says that, the governor says that, well, real estate is not under my purview, it doesn't mean speculating in real estate is illegal.
What he's trying to say is that you can go ahead at your own risk.
Yes.
But then again,
let me come again.
I'm looking at it. Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Let's also differentiate between two things. There are people who go on legitimate, well-established, well-standard exchanges to buy Bitcoin and spend. There are also people who are giving their money to third parties who say, I'm going to trade your money in Bitcoin and I'll get you some money back. Let's be clear. Those who take your money and say, I'm going to trade in Bitcoin and promise you certain returns are charlatans. It's an investment. Everybody seems to think that Bitcoin values will keep rising. For your information, they rose as far as 20,000 and they have fallen. And there are also other types of cryptocurrencies for which they have no basis and they are not as well established as Bitcoin. So there's a lot more education that needs to happen. A lot of people are jumping into a market that they know nothing about, that they don't have the capacity, that they don't understand, they don't have the security to even protect their own Bitcoins that they bought. Listen, it's worse than a novice jumping into the stock exchange to trade. Yeah, this is a whole new world.
Absolutely. Mr. Jackson.
I saw this very funny post about the 10 top countries with the Google searches for Bitcoin.
Yes.
And it includes about 8 countries where Bitcoin is actually not used.
I see, so clearly
people are not buying it to use it.
But you just want to know about it.
No, no. If we're assuming that Google searches relate to people actually taking investment decisions, then it means that about 8 of those countries, people are buying bitcoins, even though they can't use those things. Now, the problem here is that whenever you have an asset where people are buying it and it doesn't have fundamental value, it turns into speculative, and that's like what you see when people start buying dollars because they see the stars appreciate, not because they actually need dollars for anything, and that's always a risky investment. So I think the education needs to be there, but the truth is also that anybody who takes the decision to actually buy Bitcoin should know that there's not actually an investment that is guaranteed to any extent by SEC or by the BOG. And as if you're doing so, you have the money to do so, which is why you're doing it. And so you're doing it at your own risk. And you should be willing and ready to take up that risk.
What should be the posture of government towards this? Because, I mean, this is a conversation that's been going on for quite a while. Already, some people have even proposed that government should consider investing part of our GDP into Bitcoins. I mean, because of the global trend. And it's not going away anytime soon.
And that's always the problem. You see, the problem is not with, the issue is not with Bitcoin. Central banks are supposed to invest in the blockchain technology because that is useful for the payment system and for a host of other things, like I said, even land registries, not Bitcoin.
Which Bitcoin runs on.
Exactly. So if you're encouraging the central bank to invest in something, it has to be the underlying technology, not the Bitcoin itself.
It's just like saying that because somebody has to invest in an underlying technology, in cell phone technology, you bring a particular cell phone company up and you say, this is the company that we should all subscribe to. Has no basis. And I want to say again, because I get worried about the amount of people, the number of people who are all getting involved in this Bitcoin business and think they have found some magic wand that would deliver.
As an investment analyst, you described it as a high-risk investment venture.
And it's very, not just high risk, very speculative. Extremely speculative.
What's the level of volatility? I mean,
extraordinary. In a day, it can drop. Oh, did I say in a day? In 2 hours, it can drop about 27%.
Yes.
On a normal exchange, nobody would even allow an asset
to drop that by that much.
in even a day. Did you get it?
So remember, it's not illegal, but you are engaging in a very speculative venture. You can lose money, you can gain money, and it's. And you know, I am yet to meet one single person who can tell you exactly what is happening. There's a lot of hype, right? And forgive me, it looks like Bitcoin is the new Sakawa.
Well, I mean, that'll be an extreme description.
So that's what the problem comes
in. This conversation on Bitcoins, I promise you, next week, there's going to be a lot more detail in the coming weeks on this, because it's something that we cannot deny is happening. We could have probably confront it and talk about it and better understand it rather than just shying away from it and then eventually hits us in the face. But thank you, Mr. Jackson. Grateful. He joined us as always. He's the Director of Operations at Delix Finance, a financial analyst, and also Ben Amoy is an analyst at First Bank. Gentlemen, thank you. Grateful. I'm going to go for this quick break. When I come back, we'll get into our mover for today. Right afterwards as well, we'll do some analysis of the stock market and the commodities market as well. Just stay.
Very good evening to you, and thanks for staying with us on Business Focus. This is the Mover segment, and tonight we find ourselves inside Dansoman, precisely the baker's bar. She decided to quit banking 3 years into baking. Why did she take this decision, and how far does she intend to go? We'll be talking tonight with Alma Shirley Martins, who is the CEO and baker at the Baker's Bar. Good evening to you, and thanks for joining us on the Mover segment.
Good evening.
We're celebrating you this evening. You are our Mover of the Week, Alma.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Why banking to baking? Tell us, after a long while.
My experience at the banking industry was fun, but it all started when I was at the credit department, and my job requires me going out to meet clients for loan, to process their loans. Sometimes you go to very dusty places, other times you go to town, roam, the fumes from cars and all that. So it took a toll on my health. So when I weighed the options, my mom is a caterer actually, so I learned how to cook from her. So I really loved cooking. So when I weighed the options, I decided to rather go into catering. So I had to quit banking to start catering. which I also stopped along the way and started baking just 4 years ago.
So was it like an inbuilt passion because your mom was doing catering, you entered catering?
Yes,
The banking. Was it like a hobby or something?
Catering was not really a hobby. It was, let me put it, it was by force. In my house, we have 5 kids, 4 boys, I'm the only girl, but even all my brothers know how to cook. So my house, it's by force. You just have to learn how to cook. So all of us have interest in catering.
Alma here started the whole baking thing from a kitchen, and she's moved out of the kitchen. How many people did you start with, and how many, as in personnel, do you have at the moment as we speak?
When I started when I started baking, let me put it that way, I started alone. Sometimes I get my husband to help because I didn't have a cake mixer. And the job requires you creaming. If you don't have a mixer, you have to do the hand creaming. So when I get an order, I wait for him to come back from work, then he creams for me to bake. For 2 years, it was like that. It was just me and him. That until 2 years ago, when I decided to take this thing, like the baking, very seriously, that was when I started teaching, and then I started employing people. And I have four workers now at the moment.
4. So from beginning to now, you have 4.
I have 4 workers.
Permanent workers.
Permanent workers.
Okay. Now let's look at the challenges when it comes to the baking business. What are some of your challenges here, the Baker's Bar?
Our number 1 challenge is with the electricity. Unlike in the past when you buy electricity, and you can use maybe 200 Ghana cedis for a whole week. Now it's no longer like that. You buy 200 Ghana cedis within 3-4 days. You're just working and it goes off. So the tariffs are high. The fuel prices are just terrible because most of the cakes, especially when it comes to cream cakes, we deliver. Now business in Accra has been one that if you don't deliver your items, you don't get market. So everybody tries to deliver. I know people use motorbikes and all that, but I don't believe in using motorbikes to deliver cakes because cakes are very delicate and they need to be delivered to the clients in one piece. That is why I decided to deliver with a car.
And how affordable are your cakes, depending on the size?
Yes, depending on the size, an 8-inch cake, cream cake, 8 inches with fruits, you can get it for 150, and that is actually my minimum anyway.
Minimum, okay.
Yeah. I don't go below 150.
Okay. Let's look at your startup capital. How much did you start with? Not the catering, but the baking.
300 Ghana cedis.
300. And what did you get from that? What did you buy? Equipment, stuff?
I remember that day like yesterday when I went to Accra Central with 300 cedis. I got my first mixer. That was a China brand. I got it for 125 Ghana cedis. And I used the rest to buy my rolling pin, my basic things that I'll need.
It's still the Mover segment on Business Focus, and we're here at the Baker's Bar with the CEO and the baker herself, Alma Shirley Martin. Alma, I would want to be a bit inquisitive. I see the ladies doing a lot of things here. The cake has already been baked and some preparation stages. Could you take us to what exactly is happening here?
Over the years, you'll see pictures of cakes where the cakes are tilted, they are crooked, they are not straight and all that. So here at the Baker's Bar, we teach how to level your cakes. That's what she was trying to do here. So she levels them she has to make sure the cakes are leveled before she puts the other one on it. And she trims the cake at the sides just to get the edges very perfect.
Like what I see here?
Yes, like what you see here. Before we cramp coat, before we panel and cover.
I see this usually being used by the masons when they are putting up a building. What is a baker using this for?
Yes. In the baking industry, it's fun. You see you see tools. We use carpenter's tools here for drilling. Some of the cakes, the chandelier cakes you see, we drill the boards with carpentry tools. This, I agree, is for masons.
Spirit level,
Spirit
right?
level,
Okay.
yes. In the baking industry, we call it leveling plumb. We don't call it spirit level here. Okay. It's leveling plumb. So this is what we use to check the accuracy of the cake. If you see this cake, the air bubble it's in the middle. It means that this cake is very leveled.
Okay. So deciding to go into baking, where did you start from? Was it a hobby, a passion, or did you learn how to bake?
I learned how to bake. I learned from someone here in Accra, but during that time I realized that it was not really what I wanted. So I stopped. I didn't go again, actually. I stopped after a while. Then I took to learning on my own. YouTube was my friend. I could be up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. on the net, searching, watching cake videos, learning new techniques, just to
And I'm
get
sure
to
you
where
still do.
I am.
It's a continuous
I still
thing
do.
you
Yeah,
do
it's a
every time.
continuous thing I still do, because new techniques come up every day. So if you are not on your toes, learning every day, you will be left behind. And with the passion I have, with where I want to get to, where I want Baker's Bar to be in 5 years, I can't stop learning for a day.
One issue of concern has to do with the issue of obesity, which is gradually taking over society. Alma, and there's a proposal that more taxes should be put on products as in sugar and flour. Are you worried when you hear some of these concerns
I am
raised?
extremely worried, because I import my sugar, I import my flour. So I am really much worried. Clearing things at the pot now is no joke.
Why are you not
Trust
buying made
me.
in Ghana goods?
I am not against made in Ghana goods. I buy. But the texture and quality of cakes that I want, I don't get it with the flour we have here. If they will improve on their flour, praise God, I'll be the first person to buy.
Finally, before we are done here, do you have any regrets moving from banking to catering and now baking?
Not at all. Not
None at all?
None at all.
Has it been a great experience?
Very. It's been more than great. It's been more than great.
And based on your story, what would you want to tell someone watching you this evening?
We have passed, I think we have passed through the era where we wait on the government to provide jobs for us. Yes, we've been to the university and all that, but it's not that I don't see it as a duty of government to provide jobs for us anymore. People are taking the challenge to create jobs for themselves. There are people in the corporate industries who come here to learn. In this class, I have bankers. In this class, I have a doctor. I've had commissioner of police here.
Wow.
I've had lawyers coming here to learn how to bake. These are all people who are still working, but they still come to learn something, a skill, to do on part-time basis. So why is the person who is home waiting for the president or the government to give him or her a job? Take the bull by the horn. Do something for yourself. Be creative. Learn a skill.
I would want you to look into the camera and tell that person watching you something motivating this evening.
It's not been easy getting here. It's been one bumpy road. But tonight, I just want to encourage that person out there that everything is possible. Whatever you set out to do with determination and passion and prayer, it is possible.
And everything is possible is Alma's best words being used there. Well, we appreciate your time this evening. Alma Shelley Martin is the CEO and the baker here at the Baker's Bar. Well, for me here, I'll just get my gloves shortly and I'll be working on this cake. Trust me, don't doubt me. I'm sure you won't. My name is Naneka Amensa Abrampa, and that's it for the Mover segment. To return with more on Business Focus tonight. Good evening.
Okay, welcome back from that. That was a mover with Alma Shelley. She's the CEO of Baker's Bar, Naneka Amensa Abrampa there, enjoying some of the cake. Hopefully, get to enjoy it as we go on here on the show. But I've been joined in studio by Justice Edu and Edinam Nyatepe. They're analysts with First Bank Financial Services. We're going to be talking about the commodities market and the stock market as well. It's good to have you. Good evening to you. Let's start off with the stock market, right? How has the stocks been faring, at least for the year for the week under review? Sorry.
Okay, so I think we ended last year on a very positive note. I mentioned, I think last week, that among all the African countries, Ghana was the top performing market in terms of equities. And we've seen that same momentum being followed through into the first trading sessions in 2018. Last week, the market picked up by about 4.02% on the main index. The financial services index also picked up as well. And we realized that two sectors drove the increases we saw in the market. One, financial services, and two, petroleum. You have stocks like Total and Gold picking up significantly from beginning of year till now. And on the financial side, you have GCB, which is trading at astronomically high levels. Societe Generale, a stock that has been historically undervalued by markets, suddenly has picked up and is trading above 1 CD. And you have EcoBank, a stock that investors tend to associate with dividend payment, actually increasing in price and increasing more significantly. So it goes to show the trend we've seen on the market, where normally at the beginning of the year, you tend to find a lot of people buying shares, probably called the January craze. And if you look at the fact that last year, if you are an investor and you were sitting on the fence, you realize that, oh, a country like Ghana has done well in terms of its equity investment. So you also want to pump your money in. One good thing I think from the earlier discussion you would have realized is that our currency has been relatively stable against the dollar.
Absolutely.
So it's good incentive for offshore investors.
There's all a prediction that it was going to decline, at least because of the activities over the period. But we didn't see that. What could have accounted for the stability, that we witnessed? Okay,
so historically, during this time of the year, you tend to see the CD sliding against the major trading currencies. But one thing is that fundamentally, the dollar has been weak. Sometime last year it was trading at its weakest level in 3 to 4 years. So it's not really a matter of the CD doing well. Exactly,
it's about fire. The dollar is not doing
exactly.
well.
So I guess going forward, we should see how the CD is performing against the pound, against the euro. I think that will tell us the true value of the CD. If you're looking at it against the dollar, which is good for importers in Ghana because we import most of our stuff in dollars, but the dollar has remained fundamentally weak. And one good thing also is that our reserve position is also okay. So if the government has to step in, they can. But fundamentally, because of the inherent weakness in the dollar, we are seeing a relatively stable framework, a relatively stable region if you look at the CD dollar exchange rate.
Pretty interesting there. But you looked at some of the stocks that are doing well. You mentioned GCB and SG. There are those who already had doubts about some of these stocks you mentioned that are doing so well. What exactly has accounted for this positive development we're seeing in the stocks?
For any investor, the key thing you look at is the fundamentals of the business. So you're looking at how the business is run. How are they performing? And these companies are fundamentally strong companies. The banking sector had issues with asset quality and non-performing loans and all that. But we can see them making some progress in terms of cleaning up their loan book, being more conservative with the loans they give out and all that. And it sends positive signals to investors. So you're looking at mainly the fundamentals of the company. And you juxtapose that to the price at which it's trading currently. If I enter now, what's the upside potential for me? If I feel, let's say, the company is a good stock, but if I enter now, the upside potential is very limited, I might not enter. So it's a wide range of factors, but the main thing is to look at the fundamentals and see how strong the company is. And these companies are fundamentally strong.
Fundamentally strong, important. Let's go into the commodities now, Adinam. So for oil, for gold, for cocoa, how's it looking on the world market?
Okay, so for Brent, we saw the first weekly decline after several consecutive weeks of recording gains. We're still seeing the demand pressure from the refineries, and OPEC countries are still sticking to the planned cuts in production. But we're also seeing the US increase their shale production. So we are seeing that offsetting the production cuts we have seen from the OPEC countries.
And it could probably push the price of crude oil on the world market downwards.
Yes. So we expect the gains we have seen to be short-lived as the US continues to pump in more barrels of oil. Yes, so in the long run, which the prices, we'll see a dip in the prices of crude. So we'll see
that's in the long run. We'll keep monitoring that. But how about gold as well?
Okay, so for gold, we've seen last week we saw the 6th consecutive weekly increase in the price of gold, and this was as a result of the weakened dollar. There's a negative correlation between the demand for gold and then the strength of the dollar. So what this means is that when gold is weak, as the dollar weakens, we see investors demanding for more of gold. So we saw that last week. We are seeing a weakened
more like a
dollar.
safe haven
Yes,
for
a safe haven,
investment.
yes. So
But
they just want to keep it safe. And because of the decline in the price of Bitcoin, there was a sharp decline last week. So we saw most of the investors move quickly to gold. So there was a rise in demand, and that accounted for the increase in price of gold.
Well, how about the cocoa as well? Very finally, in some 30
For
seconds.
cocoa, we saw a very marginal decline, and this was as a result of reduced demand. Yeah, so that's what accounted for the decline we saw last week.
Thank you. It's always good to have you, Edinam, and also Justice. Thank you so much. So just keep faith with us. Every other Monday, we give you this information that should better still inform your investment decisions and where to invest. And they came from First Bank Financial Services. Let's keep that in mind. Thank you so much for spending your time with us here on Business Focus. On behalf of the rest of the team, we're grateful. Stay with us as we get into News 360. My name is Alfred Okanse. Good evening.